How could you tell, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
how
please.
could you tell that he was talking directly at Walia Muhammad and Testified?
Because he was looking right at him when he was yelling. He was looking right at him and talking about Christians kill Muslims, and the only person at the time wearing anything resembling a Muslim was one of the young ladies. But he was looking directly at him when he was talking about cutting their heads off and slicing their throats.
So what happened after that?
I changed my, my space where I was in the train to try and, I guess shield them from him, and maybe take some of whatever he was dishing out, and just kind of get him to kind of focus on me rather than focus on these two young girls. They look really young, they look, I'm a dad, so they look young enough. And you can tell by their reaction, they were totally like out of, they were out of their sorts. Like they were really like scared. And so I just wanted him to focus on me. That's it. That's all I could think of was I didn't want him to focus on them anymore and continue threatening them.
So did you physically move from where you were standing?
I did.
What did you make of that, of the content of what he was saying? And by content, I mean the meaning of the content.
It was, he was right there on the cusp. He hadn't, used the N-word, at that point, but, he hadn't used the N-word at all, not that I heard, but I was waiting for that. Like he was moving in that direction where it was just really, just white supremacist rhetoric,
All right, and what happened to that?
I think there was a point where when I, kind of like interjected and started, stood in between them. All I was saying to him was like, hey, look, man, it's Friday. Ain't nobody trying to hear all of that, just stop, And so, he told me to F off and, freedom of speech and, it's his country, get out of his country if I don't like it. And so I remember looking at, like, kind of like touching my hat or something like that, because I always wore a black Marine Corps hat with a Marine Corps emblem on it at the time. And I remember touching my hat and like, last time I checked, I probably got more right to this country than you do. I've done more for it probably in a year than you've done your entire life.
Did you think that to yourself, or did you say that to him?
I'm pretty sure I said that, somewhere in our back and forth. And I remember at one point he jumped up and he jumped up from his seat and he was basically like, do something, right, to me. And so, I'm used to people trying to bait me. I didn't grow up in, like somewhere where I didn't have a lot of confrontation. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I was used to it.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Go for it.
Yesterday the defense attorney said do something was a warning. Is that a warning or a challenge?
Oh, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I know that if I would have stepped forward and engaged with him, we would have just engaged. So I just stared at him while he said that, and then he waited a little while, and then he sat back down. I remember a young man, Micah. He comes down shortly after that. I'm assuming he sees them distraught. He comes down and he's like, "Hey, you don't talk to young ladies that way," or something along those lines. But he was like, he was coming from my back, and I remember just like stopping him and saying, "Hey, it's all right. He's just talking right now. He's just talking. It's cool. He's just talking." And so there's a whole bunch of back and forth between the defendant and me, the defendant and Micah, and at this point, like there are multiple people on the train now just getting tired of the rhetoric. I remember turning around, like briefly, to the young ladies and mouthing to them, "Are you okay?" And they responded. One of them said, they mouthed back yes and thank you. And then so I nodded my head and I turned back around. It looked like the defendant threw a punch. I just remember it looking like he threw a punch. And so, now I'm like, oh, okay, it's definitely escalated. This is probably what the defendant wanted. So at that point, like I said, he looked like he threw a punch. And so, I'm thinking, it's gonna be, just I guess a fight, on the train. And Micah immediately drops, and he drops to a knee, and then he's like, help, and he's grabbing his neck. And I just remember thinking, like, I've never seen, any punch do that to somebody. So I'm looking down at Micah, like, what happened? And I just remember my vantage point, I could see him holding his neck, and I could see blood coming from between his fingers. And at that point, I don't know if people saw the drops, or I'm not sure what other people saw, but I just remember screaming, and then everybody just exiting the train as fast as they could.
There's a metal post or pole, it looks like, in between you and him in that picture.
Yes.
That's on the train platform itself, I think, with some signs or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then in States 44, which is a second or two later, I believe, is still from the video. Is that you on the far right, sir?
That is correct. That is me.
And so in this picture, has the defendant circled around that metal post?
Yes, he has.
And what are you doing?
I'm getting out of the way and preparing. I honestly thought that when he didn't do it in the train, I thought that he had run off. But when he came back, I thought he was ready to engage at this point. So I'm going to his right, my left, because the knife is in his right hand. So, but I'm preparing. But if I go to his right, it's more of he has a better, I guess, advantage.
Well, so you're a big guy.
Yes.
And you're a tough guy, and you're a Marine.
I'm not a tough guy.
You're not a tough guy. Well, okay, tougher than some. But, sir, at that moment, did you believe that the defendant was going to stick that knife into you?
I believed he was going to try, yes.